So great to get to reconnect with you after that event. So wonderful to touch base and to see what you were up to, and to know what you were up to. And obviously, a lot of things align with what you're doing. And I couldn't believe how quickly the support and feed program, like, holy shit, I was thinking you were doing it for years and years and years, and you literally kind of just started.
We just
Talk to
started.
me about, yeah, talk to me about how that you just saw like a gap and you saw like this need and
Well, to be honest, when it started, it was real emergency response. It was we were home from Billy's tour, and the tour had very much for me been about sustainability. We had Reverb on tour with us. I was doing little Instagram lives from, showing the green, how we were making the venue green, and here's all the vegan catering, and here's this, and here's our composting. Boom, we came home. And, just in about 4 days in, I was like, wow, this is going to be so devastating for people are going to need food and small businesses are going to close. And Billy, let's order a bunch of food and like have it sent to a place. So it started out as like the most basic, not thought through idea. We just like bought a bunch of food on, at Postmates or something, had it delivered to the Midnight Mission. And then I was like, this is a good idea, but it's so much bigger than this. So I called like over, I thought sort of thought about it all night. And when you have that thing in life where you're like, I think I'm about to step into my life being taken over by something, and you're not quite sure. You're like, I could just walk right by this idea. So I just called some people the next day. I was like, I have this idea. Everyone, it was the beginning of COVID, like the very beginning in March. People were unemployed. Everyone was like, I will help you. I will help you. And so we launched our website in 5 days, and we were delivering food in 7. But, originally we just thought we'll just feed a lot of people and we'll help people raise money, and we'll keep small businesses, plant-based businesses, because those are the ones where people discover plant-based food, which is more nourishing, helps the climate, the whole ball of wax, right? And very, very, very quickly, we realized, oh, this is a missing link in programs that feed people. The connection of food justice and climate is missing. And so we just realized that there was this much bigger mission. And we really all it seemed long, but when I look back, like you say, we started in LA. We were in New York within like 2 or 3 weeks. We were in Philly not long after. We were in DC. When you have this strong, passionate urgency and you don't have any time to waste, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So then we really, really focused in like, where could we be the most impactful, right? So every meal that Support and Feed delivers to someone who replaces an Omni meal, our meals are all plant-based. So every meal that we do, we automatically make some impact on what we know is impacting climate from the animal agriculture. But how can we be more impactful? Well, first of all, we focus on organizations in communities that are in food apartheids that generally have lack of access to nourishing food. So we can help those recipients even more. We can expose people to food that they may not have had. We can work with community orgs that need support. And then we can add an educational component on both sides. So on the side of the recipients of the meals, we when people are open to it, like to add some information about the health benefits of the food, how nourishing the food is. We have board members who are physicians, if people want to talk to someone. On the other side, we started a really active social media platform because we realized we had all of these wonderful fans of my children, really, who wanted to learn about sustainability and the climate crisis and plant-based food and food justice. And so on that side, we started an education platform really to inform people about all of those things. So that's how we are trying to magnify what we do. So yeah, it happened so fast. um,
that's a that's amazing. And there's a I mean, obviously I want to backtrack because I'm fascinated as to your journey with your children. because there's some element that I'm perceiving that's different than you and a let's call it a regular mom who has superstardom children, because you also have your own trajectory. So I want to go back to what you said, and that is, let's unpack this a little bit, because I'm deeply fascinated and been enlightened around food insecurity and food, call it food justice, wrapped in the same kind of thing, in terms of it's literally happening right here in our cities around the country. It's not Kenya, Africa, and this some bullshit story, even though that those people are suffering. But I'm saying bullshit from the sense that it's a far off problem and we're all good. Like, and that's the disparity. And so food insecurity, there's literally communities in LA, in New York, you name it, that don't even have access, don't even know what a whole food looks like, let alone what a whole plant looks like. And they're reaching for 7-Eleven.
They're reaching for 7-Eleven because that's all that's close to them, you
Yeah.
know? And it's all that's affordable and all that's even available. I mean, that,
Yeah.
you know, you're hitting on it. That 38 million people are food insecure in our country currently. I'm sure that number has actually gone up, but between the last one time I read it and now, and we know that food insecurity is more prevalent Black and brown communities, for as is the climate crisis affecting those communities more. And as you say, lack of access, you know, my eyes were open. I have to be honest. Like, I've been, you know, I'm completely guilty of having been very obsessed with the climate crisis and not really being as aware as I should be about my own backyard.
Right.
You know, one of the things that really happened to me was I was really doing a lot of the food delivery, as we all were on our massive volunteer team. Um, and I remember the summer of 2020, I would be driving meals to you know, South East LA, and literally at the same time I'd be listening to NPR talk about the climate crisis and how that in areas of our cities the temperature can be 2 degrees hotter. And it was the middle of the summer, and I was literally driving to areas that were hotter with no trees, because that's a whole other subject of absentee landlords, and so there's not trees, etc. And you know, kind of experiencing sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say it's firsthand because it's observatory, but you know, this climate affecting people. And then driving through neighborhoods and really, there's no grocery store here. There's no grocery store. Forget Whole Foods. There's nothing. You know, there's not a Vons. There's not a Safeway. There's nothing. There's a 7-Eleven and, you know, and a bunch of fast food restaurants. And you know, I also, you know, I've been a plant-based eater for many, many, many years. I've been a vegan forever, not forever, but for many years. And there's a real privilege in that world, and a real, um, there's a lot of misconceptions. I mean, I've heard a lot of wonderful people say things like, well, rice and beans are cheap, or, you know, anybody can get a sweet potato. It's like, well, first of all, there's so much wrong with that statement, you know, you can't even begin to get that. But second of all, that's not even true. Many people can't go get a sweet potato. You know, you're going to take 2 buses to get your groceries and then not be allowed to carry more than 2 bags on the bus. You know, the laws are complex and ridiculous, and the systemic racism in the food system is intense. And, you know, if you don't start thinking about it, then it all seems, like you say, quite easy. You know, oh, just throw this Band-Aid at it.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head with a throwaway statement like that, in terms of most people say, well, hey, just eat whole food. Well, like if I'm a, you know, a teenager and I live in this community and I really haven't been around beyond a 5-block radius, and within that 5-block radius there is literally no grocery stores, there's no access to it, there is just what I see at these markets, and quite frankly more alcohol ridden stores than anything else. That's a really big issue. And I think we have a mutual friend in John Lewis.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Right. So John, and a shout out to that documentary, and they're trying to kill us.com. I mean, that's just like right in your face. And I so appreciated that documentary, because it's not even taking a stand. It's just showing and revealing what is going on. And that is something that is so interesting in our day and age, how people don't even want to face their own darknesses, let alone, we want to perceive as everything's perfect, and it's not for so many people. And so
Yeah,
that
that documentary is really eye-opening. Even if you think a fair amount, which I don't feel like I knew enough, but that documentary was truly shocking. As you say, just facts. So enlightening.
yeah,
Crazy.
crazy. So what have you learned now from the feed and support process, from when you started to now? Like, what's the biggest shock? I mean, you've done so much. You got the PETA's 2020 award, 60,000 plus people. You've got food. Like, come on, that is amazing. We've talked about FarmLink and about this just disparaging between all of these kind of things. So what keeps you thriving now, and what's the most shocking thing, I think, that you've discovered?
Well, 60,000 meals was also just in 2020. So that was in like
Wow.
9 months. That was in 9 months we
Jeez.
got. And let me just say too, what makes Support and Feed different is on many levels. We don't really think of ourselves as a food charity. We think of ourselves as food justice and climate crisis. And we support small businesses too. We support local community. Let me rephrase that. And the reason I say that is because we are paying also a fair wage for the meals. Sometimes the meals are donated to us by restaurants, et cetera, but mainly we're purchasing them with donated money because we're also supporting local communities. Our restaurant owners employ a staff. That food came from a farm. There is a real so this is one of my big takeaways. People do not get what the cost of food is, because our government subsidizes meat and dairy, right? It subsidizes sugar, it subsidizes food, but it doesn't really subsidize, having a farmer's market in a community with no grocery store, right? So the cost of food, people really don't understand it. And that has been a real eye-opener and a challenge for us, to have a nonprofit that is paying a fair wage for a meal to begin with, and that is a delicious chef-created meal. I don't even want to say sometimes the unbelievably surprising things that I hear from people who have money, to be honest, but don't understand that you should feed a human being a nourishing, delicious meal that was paid for fairly, right?
Yeah.
So that has been very eye-opening and a bit of a hurdle for us, because listen, there's a lot of great food programs in the world, but if you're leaving out that dignity and fair wage and the climate, right? So if you're feeding millions and millions and millions of meals and you have no plant-based meals in your arsenal, right? You're missing this massive opportunity to address climate and to enlighten and to give people healthier food. So that has been like the biggest kind of takeaway of this kind of in the food side of it. It has been shocking to me. And listen, I always have empathy for people, because you don't know till you know. And there's so much I've learned, and my ignorance is profound, so I get it. But we're so indoctrinated in our country with misconceptions around food, starting with what's a healthy meal, so many, and that's a hurdle we've had to kind of overcome, or that's one of the things that we really address. People grow up with um, indoctrination about what makes a healthy meal. And culturally, in whatever their families, in all of our lives, we're fed food that becomes associated with home and health and well-being. And it often has nothing to do with what actually is healthy, and certainly not what's healthy for the planet. So we, and I don't even know what your question was at this point, so I'm probably not addressing it, but learning to address the introduction of healthy food, because we're competing with these misconceptions. And so many people may not have even eaten a meal that is fully plant-based as far as they know. So you have to kind of meet people where they are, give them food that feels right to them, that they're willing to try, and kind of ease into like, all right, maybe if you like this, would you like to try this? Would you like to try this? The dignity of that too, of not just saying, here's your food, but what would you like? What is something that seems good to you? And then kind of working your way toward an area where you're enjoying it, and maybe we're making it healthier for you, and we are addressing the climate as well. So those are sort of the big obstacles and challenges that we have realized that we need to do better at and really focus our energy at. It's really like everything probably comes down to information and education, on all sides, and that's donors and our social media audience as well as community organizations, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you hit on so many very important things, I think, and how you answered the question perfectly, by the way, because the awarenesses as you've gained them is around, all of these, and it is indoctrinated. It is what we've grown to learn about meat costs this, happy meal costs that, whatever that is. And then culturally and family and all of that stuff, this is just what it is. And so your organization is trying to do, on the one hand, just get food to people, but it's got amazing layers to it, that, like you said, you have a lot of obstacles that you have to kind of navigate through. So I mean, that is the kind of the biggest, and on top of it, it's got this overarching plant-based thing, that, obviously it's moving in a good direction, but within kind of the food insecurity movement, they're not thinking of that selection. They're just thinking of like, can I just have some food? And so
That's right.
it's a
You know,
big,
one
yeah.
of the things that I think was one of the things that I think maybe we've done that I'm happy about is just even having conversations with other organizations that feed people, because again, kudos to all those organizations, but we have the opportunity to go like, what's your plant-based, where are you in that space? And to be honest, many of them are like, we don't have that. Like maybe we even have special meals for other things, but we're not really focused on that. And fortunately now, I think everybody a little late to the table, but is realizing you got to have that on your strategy. You can't have I mean, we see it at places like the COP26, et cetera. It's like, really? Really? You're not addressing animal agriculture? You're not having plant-based food as all the food that you serve? Like, how can that be? And so I think the opportunity just to talk to other orgs and go like, well, what are you doing there? And if they're not doing something, I don't mind being a little elbow in the ribs, to be like, well, you should.
Right.
I'd love it if support and feed was unnecessary, all the
Exactly.
major feeding programs could put us out of need right away, although I think our strategy of information education and meeting people where they are is super highly important to what we do and will always be necessary. But I would love it if all those programs just overnight were at least 50% plant-based. That would be incredible.
Well, you bring up such a important thing, which we don't have to open up the can of worms too much, but I turned down COP26. They wanted me to come so many times, and I just there's something about it. Like, I think there's great people doing great things everywhere, even within big companies that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think there are great people, and I think there's great people trying to do great things. But fundamentally, I think things like this, the disparaging things that are just being like, how do you not, you know, getting around and talking about it, making more lists. Number one, just the fundamental side of making infinite goals makes it kind of infinitely impossible to actually do anything about it. So
That's
that's
true.
just on the side,
Well, I mean, I
you
think
know.
I think you're right, and I think there's the worry. There is the worry about people kind of innately feeling like, well, I've done something now. I went to a conference. You're right. It's like, well, that's not actually doing something. That's talking about doing something, but it does sort of, I think, for a lot of people, we have to be careful because there's things that check our boxes, and then we feel like we've done enough because we checked that box.
Totally. Yeah. So, a little bit on that, the subsidy side of things, because this is it's kind of a statement, but it's also a question. Um, like, a lot of people don't realize that these cheap foods that they're getting are literally tax dollars, and have been going to this amount of factory farming to make what would be infinitely more expensive, which would be beautiful because the metanomics of that would actually lower the ability for people to eat that food plus that poor quality food. So it would actually work itself out. So the government's come there, throwing the whole thing off anyway. Do you know, because this is, again, I don't know, do you know how that came to be? Not necessarily the history of it, and how the hell can that happen? That's like our money that we've worked hard for, and that it just goes on, and we don't have a say about it. We don't get to vote about it. And the government's supporting crappy businesses. I just don't get it, and I don't know what to do about it.
I mean, I don't know how it started, but we all know it's lobbyists, right? It's these big corporations hire lobbyists and they donate a lot of money to campaigns, and politicians are in the pocket. It's the same problem with many issues that we could talk about, where it's like, how can that be? How could this be? And you want to just scream. You're like, well, it's a really simple answer. It's money. If you have a lobby, and I'm sure there's somewhere in the history where it had some kind of good intention, right? The American farmer, and there was some kind of idea that we're going to help. And then it becomes about the money. And as you say, the crazy thing is, we are paying for it. We are paying for it. When we watch the news and we watch farmers pour milk down the drains that the government is subsidizing them to create, at the horrific suffering of the animals involved and the workers and everything else. They're literally pouring it down the drain because they're subsidized. They have to create it. Not that they create it, but the animals. So it's what really drives me insane is how few people talk about it. Cory Booker, being the exception, the new mayor of New York City, thank goodness, we'll talk about it, Eric Adams, but they will sit and talk about anything but. It's crazy to me. Anything. Well, I mean, they've got the same issues with, the energy industries as well, but it's all about money. And I think when people, the funny thing is, people will be so irritated about vegans, you know, irritated with vegans. And like, what you should be irritated about? You should be irritated about that your money is spent for these things that, like you say, you have no say in, and that is subsidizing an industry that is largely responsible for destroying the planet, or destroying our ability to live on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just to be, I wouldn't say fair, but just to the system of the factory farming, the horrific conditions and the billions and billions of animals every year, it's just beyond. If any of those people complain about, we're just saying eat more plants, just spend a day, if you could ever even do that, spend a day in that scenario and watch the death of your dead flesh that you're going to be eating. Watch that process, watch that cow, that chicken, that whatever go through that process, and face it again. We're so in delusion in our lives that we don't even want to face ourselves with our own issues, let alone face this reality. So it's like I also know that we can't just flip a light switch and have factory farming go away, but we can move in a better direction. We can save billions of lives of animals. We can use the infrastructure. We can get people to wake up to eat more plants and less meat, fish, dairy, and eggs. And it will be better for them and better for the planet. So we need to move in that direction. We need to do less villainizing of all these things, but actually move in that direction. And that's where it's like, the realism for me has woken up over time. We filmed a lot of amazing stuff on season 2 of Down to Earth, where I had to witness some things that were very, very difficult for me, but I needed to do it just as a witness. I can't get into it right now, but it's really facing all of this stuff head on, right? And like what we're not making stuff up. There's subsidies, there's billions of animals dying under horrible conditions. The quality of that food is so horrible that it shouldn't even be consumed anyway.
So true.
So that we're not even getting into that. I love the fact that, if we go, the great Paul Hawken, right? Drawdown, regeneration. If you follow nature, there's no side effects. It's only a proliferation of abundance, right? So if we follow that principle, we build the soil, we build plants, we let people eat those plants, we give the power back to the farmer, take the chemicals away, let them create seeds and give them their sovereignty back. That's the world that I am fired up about as well, and getting that back.
It's beautifully said, and I think what we're trying to do with Support and Feed is really what you're trying to do with your show. Create a market, create a demand. If we have a society that basically only follows the money, right? And we have this horrific system of animal agriculture, and we can't get our politicians to understand. Well, we start at the root. We're feeding people who need nourishing food to begin with. And not only are we giving you nourishing food, but maybe you now learn that plant-based food is good. And maybe you now ask all the organizations where you may receive a meal or you may purchase a meal if there's plant-based meal. And now maybe you're talking to your community organization about, let's have plant-based meals here, and you start a movement because you follow the money. And if you create that market everywhere and you give people the dignity to ask for what they need and know what's serving them. And the same with the documentaries and the shows that you make, opening people's eyes so that we're coming at it from the other side. Of course, the concern we both have is I'm not sure we have enough time for that. But that's kind of the strategy we have.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just have to swing for the fences, right? Yeah. We just have to do it, because at the end of the day, the man and woman in the mirror that we have to face, let's just give it a go. Let's do this. And I love what you're doing, because it's literally putting food into people, and having access to that. And I was an image popped into my mind about, let's say, a child who's never had any plant, kind of never really saw whole plants, just processed food, and that's just what they had. Imagine a world where that child saw and even picked a fresh apple and ate that apple. I mean, I don't know about you, but fresh, delicious food is it is the candy of the universe. Like
Oh,
it is
absolutely.
delicious, it is abundant, it is nourishing, it is, tell me a child doesn't love a fresh strawberry, a blueberry, a banana, a date like that.
Mm.
And that, to me, we should celebrate that. We should race towards that future as fast as possible, because listen, I'm also under the camp of, I'm kind of divorcing the term climate change. I'm
Oh.
kind of, because the I'm not divorcing the principles. I'm divorcing the 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 lack of understanding that has create, because it has turned political. So I'm like, so that's where I'm like, well, if you get plants to people, if you support the farmer, if you build the soil from dirt, again, guess what happens?
Yeah, the
Again,
earth
you
heals.
follow nature, and it draws down the CO2, it kills less animals, it nourishes people.
Mm.
People nourished lead, need less care from a broken
Medical.
healthcare system. So it's just, again, it's like, it's not rocket science. The nature herself is infinitely powerful. But if we go against her, it's just it's just a
She's more
tough fight.
powerful than us. And, to that point, of course, we've talked about Aiden and FarmLink and all the wonderful work that they do, and we're teaming up with them to get more of that produce to the families in the communities we're feeding meals, and also get food to the chefs to make more food. We also have teamed up with an organization, Wild Elements, and we're going to be monitoring a freight farm. So a freight farm is sort of, bringing the farm to the area that, so it'll be all contained hydroponic at one of our community orgs, and we'll be monitoring that and training people to work in that industry. And, that the kind of solutions of bringing, I mean, I have so many ideas. My brain. Thank goodness there's smart people who can do spreadsheets, because all I feel like I can do is go like, oh, and then we should do this, and we could do this.
Right.
I was talking to Aiden about, wouldn't it be awesome to like get the produce to the 7-Elevens, get it to the Popeyes chickens, like
Right.
have our, what I mean, take it where people are going to be, because they don't, just have it there. Hey, you got your sandwich, and you you get a beautiful bag of grapefruits.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah. So support and feed. There's essentially, you're tackling some big things. So unpack that for me. So you have obviously people that need food. You have businesses that are struggling. You now are tapping into farmers that have no place to deliver their food. Um, and then you have chefs and restaurants and people to make it. That's a lot of coordinating. But again, I think it's a missing link, right? So how is that coordination happening? How do you expand? How are restaurants jumping in on this? Like, how does that look?
Well, you hit on the challenge of all nonprofits, I think, right? Is how do you, how does it look? Because I was literally just talking to Gloria at the Solutions Project. When you have this opportunity, this amazing opportunity to make an impact, and you have only so much money to do it. And, we operated for a year and a half, 100% volunteer, 100%. We had people working 15 hours a day, 6 days a week during COVID. Many people were like, I got so much sleep. And we are like, oh, we didn't sleep at all. So we were 100% volunteer. And then we started paying 3 people in July, and then more stipends. And, we need to pay more people, because, of course, you have to start where you live and have people earn a fair wage. And also to fulfill the opportunity that we have. First of all, we have this amazing opportunity next year. My daughter Billy is going on tour. First of all, Phineas just finished a tour, and he did the same. He raised some money for support and feed by selling a little higher price ticket. They're meant to compete with scalpers, is what they're for. But then the artist donates the money. Instead of it going to a scalper, they donate to a charity. So with donations from Phineas, and then next year Billy, they're donating a large number, a large amount, so that we can expand support and feed to all the cities on the tour, have a presence in all the cities, be able to meet fans at the venues, get volunteers, establish support and feed all over the country, in Europe, in Australia. And we need matching funds for that because, of course, money only goes so far. So a lot of it, like everything, is raising enough money so that you can, first of all, feed a lot of people. When you have a charity that is first and foremost direct service, that's just money in, money out, and then you've got all the management costs of making these programs happen and creating these great programs. So that's our big tug all the time. And then, the restaurant component is an interesting one. We do have now many people also donating meals who see our mission. We have non-plant-based restaurants donating plant-based meals. So we have Fresh Brothers, donating vegan pizzas, and we're hoping to have more and more of those. And we also, we've been purchasing meals from local businesses. We'd love to get that even more local, even more community based, and also widen our net to non-plant-based restaurants to have more plant-based options. And as we go into the cities around the country, that's going to be a very big project for us, because many of the cities may not even have a plant-based restaurant, or maybe have only one. So if we're buying, hundreds of meals, we need to have more options. And we'd love to have all the restaurants, from the big, the main chains that we can all think of to the mom and pops, have a much bigger awareness of plant-based food, have plant-based sections. You can call it the support and feed section if you want. Donate $1 to us for every meal to feed other people. We have to grow our sites beyond the converted, beyond the people who already understand. So that's a big part of our mission, to get to a larger scope of purveyors of food, to incorporate things like FarmLink. And we have we are partners in Philadelphia, Sharing Excess. The great thing is we kind of accidentally hit on the perfect name for what we do. In the beginning, we're just like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to support communities. We're going to support, small community businesses and small community orgs. And we're going to feed people. We're support and feed, And it turned out was the perfect name, because it's really what we do. We're supporting so many community orgs that are already doing amazing work in their community. And that's been very crucial for what we do. So we didn't sort of come in and focus on us. We focus on them, right? So our meals are going to, the Boys and Girls Clubs, or My Friend's Place, or, the children's, all over the country, different ones. So we are really shining a light on what they do at the same time and amplifying it. And that's been amazing, because we went from some community orgs that, in COVID, every charitable org, regardless of what they did, had to focus on finding food for people. It was amazing. It was like they might have been involved in, something to do with education or school or gangs or whatever they did, LGBTQ, and suddenly all they had to do was find food for people. And even occasionally they were not interested in vegan food, even with that need. And again, we kind of won our way in with like, well, try this food, try this, see what you like. But really shining a light on those orgs, because community orgs are really where it's at. They have the connection to the people. They are right there on the ground. And so us shining what we have been lucky enough to have a bigger light because of social media, and fortunately because of, Billy and Phineas being willing to, let this light somewhat be shared with, them, shine the light on all those different people that are doing amazing things like FarmLink and Sharing Access and Boys and Girls Clubs and on, Sisters of Watts, on and on.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. It's like it's so obvious that collaboration, you could shine the light, and you could also step on the foundation of so many of these organizations, right? And to
That's a great
build
way to
on
say
that.
it.
Yeah. So it's it's such a beautiful thing. And that's, if we haven't learned anything in this last couple of years, it is creating a future, and it's collaborative, and it's not waiting around for anybody, especially those that are being subsidized or anything else. It's us as the billions of people on this planet do absolutely have the strongest voice, and can move mountains if we all understand what's going on and also can contribute to that new world. And I'm just stoked. I'm just really, I know that it's a lot of effort, and I know that we're scratching the surface. How can people, so like if people are listening here, I think there's a few different phases maybe people can help, right? So
Mhm.
if they're entrepreneurs, if they own restaurants, if they're in other communities, or if they're just inspired and individuals that want to get people food in their country and just realize that people don't have access to good quality food, how can they help?
Mm. Well, supportandfeed.org is the basis of, where to find us. And, donations of money are always great. Donations of time, if people have time, and that doesn't always have to be, it can be delivering food, because we do carefully take the food to the places. We have to pick
Yeah.
up large amounts of food and take it, and it has to be a personal connection. And some of that changes with COVID restrictions, et cetera. But there's also volunteering on other levels, people who volunteer. We have a volunteer in the Ukraine who helps with our website, so those kind of volunteers, and that would be info at Support and Feed. Um, and then I think just being, following our social media is actually really impactful, because following our social media is part of what we do. Education, information is as a part of our DNA. And following that also helps us, to be honest, show partners and brands and grantors that there's an impact being made. And all of those people we consider on our team, everyone who's seeing me make a recipe and then making it themselves, or asking a question, or going to their own, and that's something else people can do. I think it's a very straightforward thing to do, is when you eat anywhere, you ask these questions. You ask the questions: do you have plant-based food? What do you have? Could you make that plant-based? What if you had a plant-based section? I find that people are shockingly open to these kinds of conversations. Different from, when I was having them 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
People looked at you like you're insane, but now people are interested, like, what if I provided you with some recipes? Or what if you made that one dish vegan? Or do you know about Support and Feed? Talking to their own local restaurants and community orgs. Also, since we're going to be on tour, um, coming to our eco village, and even just writing to Support and Feed, info at Support and Feed, to tell us about places in your cities that we could look into. We were so touched that when we started Support and Feed, support little, non-trademarked Support and Feeds sprung up around the world, which was amazing. People were like, I'm going to do it in my town. I'm going to do it in my town. So if you're interested, we're also happy to share what we do, if there's a way you could incorporate it into your own organization. And we'll be growing Habits of Waste, which is Sheila Maravati's organization. They have hashtag 8meals, and we're putting our recipes on there as well as on our website. Again, those community partner orgs. So just follow us on social media and on our website for all kinds of tips to sort of be involved, get involved, be a part of it.
I'm so fascinated with, you've had a long career yourself, right? Actress, and in that process, you homeschooled your children, and then boom, like, and the interesting thing is, I'm just gonna throw this out there. It's just it's like an intuition or something that I feel. It's like you've kicked ass in your life, right? So it's not like you have these two kids that are kicking ass and doing their thing, and you're kind of riding you're actually still kicking ass, doing your thing, and you have your own autonomy. And that's interesting, because you see so much in superstardom. You see so much of not a balance in that. And you're solid in yourself. You're doing your thing. You've had multiple careers, and you've built this foundation for your kids, what I can see, being connected to things that really matter. But also you birth them into their passions and their inspirations. So like, I have so many questions around that, but how has that been for you in navigating your career and then watching your children do what they're doing?
Well, you know, it's funny, people sort of wonder, like, if you kind of know where they are now, it can easily look like there was some kind of plan to get there. But of course there wasn't. We were just parenting, and just like all parents do, or parents who love parenting do, you're following your kids' interests. And in our case, we homeschooled for a variety of reasons, not the least of which, I'm from Colorado and I was really shaken by Columbine, and I was like, I don't think we need that. But we were just super involved parents, and in the homeschool world kind of allowed us to be very present and use kind of all of our own gifts at that point, or skills. So I was teaching everything I knew how to do. I was teaching aerial circus, and I was teaching cake decorating, and I was teaching drama and improv and life skills and nonviolent communication. And my husband was teaching how to fix things and Shakespeare. And, we sort of just used everything we knew how to do. And it was really very fulfilling. We had to make a living at the same time, but we also, we have a very small expense sheet. We live in a small house, and we don't spend a lot of money. We don't have a lot of, we don't have a lot of expenses. We live very frugally, and that allowed us to, of course, with the privilege of not having to have two jobs in a day. And we were actors. We didn't work a lot. Which means we got a lot of time with our kids, but we worked just enough to squeak by with some teaching. So that was just parenting, and then, when this started to happen, I made a movie in there. I wrote a movie. I made the movie. I was creating a lot of things along the way. So when this all sort of happened, just like anything in parenting, I think the parents of a kid who becomes a basketball player, a tennis player, or a gymnast, or when your children have these worlds that suddenly require pretty much 100% of your attention to that, because, what are you going to do when your kid's 13 years old and they, suddenly have to go to a meeting at Interscope Records, So I really didn't have a choice. I don't even think, I wanted to be there to support them. And before Billy started, Phineas had a band, and we were hauling the gear and, doing all the band parent stuff. So it was really just kind of parenting. And then I think maybe the only thing I'll say that might be different from some parents is, because she was so young, nobody questioned that I was in the room. I think if an artist takes off a bit later, maybe you don't get that kind of welcome as a parent. But I was really, really required. And so my eyes were open. So I asked a lot of questions, and I had to learn a lot of stuff. I had to learn a whole new industry that I knew very little about, and just ask a lot of questions. And then, because of my own interests, I would ask questions like, well, why isn't this, why do we have plastic water bottles, and why do we have this, and wow, this is not a very green industry, so my own personal values and interests segued, so while I was learning about what's publishing and what's a writer share, what's a sync, what's a mechanical, all that music industry stuff I had to learn, I was also in the room to go, hey, can't we have composting on our set? And where's the food going after the shoot? And we want all vegan food, So I just kind of blended the two. So I mean, it sort of provided an amazing opportunity for me, really, which I certainly didn't realize in the beginning. But the ability to affect change in any way in an industry that I never would have had personally. Never would have had it. I wouldn't have been in a room with Nike, you know, or, you know, Gucci. I wouldn't have been in those rooms, you know, to go like, let's see your sustainability platform, you know. I've had calls with companies, to be honest, like, I'm sure they're only talking to me because I'm Billy's mom, but I'm like, you know, tell me, you know, when you're going to have this. And they'll be like, well, by 2030. I'm like, that's ridiculous. You could do that in a week, you know?
Well,
So
that's,
it's been an opportunity, you know?
yeah. So have you found that, because I have my own, some good, you know, within some really big companies. What have you found? Have you found that, is there, I mean, yes, but is there a lot, are you finding a lot of greenwashing similar to that? Like they're stating it and it's 30 years later, or are you finding some good people wanting to do good things? Like, what have you been finding?
I've found both.
Yeah.
Definitely both. I've
Yeah.
been in rooms where I've been like, you know, someone says like, "Oh, this is eco, you know, eco-friendly." I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" And they go, "It means it's friendly to the environment." I'm like, "No, no, no. What does it mean?" You
What is
know?
that? Yeah.
So I've had those exchanges for sure, but I've also seen companies that really are invested. I mean, you know, we've been doing this for a while now because Billy started when she was young, and you know, the first few years weren't, you know, she wasn't in this kind of position, you know, but once we started to have those, you know, early on, you know, in a career, you don't have any power, you know, you're barely making any money. And so when you start to ask those questions and, you know, people push back, but I remember saying like, if you're not ahead of this, you're going to be behind. And, you know, we need to see this now. And I feel that that's really, really true. I feel like everyone is just barely keeping up now. And if you are not on this, you are behind, you know, and I do sense that more and more and more, you know, things are happening. And listen, other artists are doing incredible things too, like Jaden Smith and Coldplay and on and on. They've made incredible strides. So some of each, definitely some of each. Some where you're just like shocked. You're like, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but you're like, I was once on a call. I was like, you could replace literally everything you have with like plant-based overnight. No one would know, you know. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do that in 10 years. It's like, that's going to be too late, FYI.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, it is. I mean, in my own way too, seeing big companies wanting to do good things, and like I mentioned, the company footprint.
Mhm.
You know, the overwhelming thing of single-use plastic in the world. You're like, how the hell are we supposed to change that? Because everything is wrapped in it, and you know, all the convenience and all the bottles and all of the cups and all of the tops and all of the straws and all of the, just like, holy shit. I tell you what, I was more encouraged in a hour conversation a couple of years ago when I talked to the CEO, going, no, we're already dealing with ConAgra, we're already dealing with Walmart, we're already dealing with, and not only dealing, selling.
Great.
And they had to create a whole industry of mechanisms to create the material science plant-based fiber to then replace that at cost. So unfortunately, because money's so powerful, if you can meet them very, very close to that price point, then the adoption is instantaneous, you know?
I want to learn so much more about that, and we'll have that side conversation because
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, there are definitely encouraging things, and most of it's coming from technology, you know, thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
So there definitely are encouraging things, and we just have to keep looking at them every day. Um,
Totally.
and you have
Totally.
to constantly question. I also heard this phrase recently, which I really appreciated, which was youth washing. You know, there's greenwashing and there's youth washing. You know, there's people who are saying that they're involving youth and they're listening to young
Oh,
people, and
wow.
but a lot of that's not actually accurate as well. So
That's very
being, I
interesting.
think, just constantly challenging, you know, and challenging, and you know what else? I mean, you probably experience this as well. One of the challenging things for people like my children, but not my children because they've been brave about it, but you get so much flack, you know, when you try to do good, you get a lot of flack for not doing better. You know, you do this and oh, you didn't do that. And you said this, but you did this. And that stops a lot of people from doing anything, or at least talking about it. And that's got to end, you know? So, yes, there's greenwashing, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, if somebody's doing something good,
Yeah.
good for them. You know, if they're not perfect, okay, they're not perfect, but you've got to stop beating people up. We spend so much time in our society beating up people who are doing good but not doing enough than we do looking at people who are doing nothing.
It's a very, very good point. And unfortunately, because of social media and this fast communication and people sitting back, the critics and the criticizing is unbelievable in that way. And yeah, we just got to stop. I had someone reach out to me the other day. Oh, he was like, it was a Weston Price heavy meat eating thing. And I was just promoting a plant-based program that I've got coming out. And he was like, you haven't read enough. You're doing things wrong and blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, listen, dude, do you? You can easily in a half a second unfollow me if I am filling you full of bullshit. So just leave. Like, you know, it's just like we can't deal with that stuff, and we're fighting too much. And I am humbly in this place where I agree with you 1,000,000% of let's move forward conscious. Even people who want to eat meat, okay, but eat it better. Get out of this system, because let's move forward in better systems. Let's at least do it eyes wide open, and not shame and blame and beat people up in the process.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Well, Maggie, I could talk to you forever. There's so
Me
many
too.
great things. But thank you so much. We'll come up with a way that I and my team and my whole community can help, because I think it would be fun to try to get a bunch of
Amazing.
meals together.
That would be great.
Yeah,
So great to meet you. So
yeah.
thrilled. Love what you're doing. I want to come see the yurt and see you. But thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.